The Empire's greatest minds gathered in a dark, quiet room, their faces lit by the soft glow of monitors and flickering data. For years, they had studied the stars, mapping out every corner of space, cataloging every signal, every anomaly, every piece of information they could find. But today was different. Today, they had discovered something truly remarkable, something that should not be possible. The signal had appeared out of nowhere. At first, it was a small glitch, a strange pattern in the endless sea of space noise. But then, the signal grew stronger, clearer, and with each passing moment, it became harder to ignore. The scientists in the room stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. It was a ship, or at least it looked like one. But there was a problem. The ship was moving faster than any ship had the right to move. No known technology could explain how it was traveling. It was faster than light, faster than any ship the Empire had ever seen. But that wasn't the strangest part. What really caught their attention was the fact that this ship had no origin. There was no record of it in any database, no history, no signature. It had appeared as if out of thin air. The sensors couldn't even get a clear reading on it. Its presence was just there. Captain Zane, the commander of the Empire's fleet, looked at the data with a frown. "This can't be right," he said, tapping his fingers on the table. "A ship moving like this doesn't just pop into existence. It doesn't make sense." He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowing. The ship was in deep space, far beyond the known borders of Empire-controlled territory. But its movement wasn't erratic. It was deliberate, as if it knew exactly where it was going. But the question was, who or what was controlling it? The Empire had faced many challenges before, but this was different. This wasn't a threat they could prepare for. It was a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous. The scientists began running more tests, trying to gather more information, but every effort led to the same dead end. There was no known technology capable of achieving the speeds this ship was reaching. The closest they could compare it to was the ancient legends of ships that could move faster than light, but even those stories seemed far-fetched. The Empire had been building ships for centuries, but nothing like this. "It doesn't make sense," Captain Zane repeated, his voice quieter now. "How is it possible for a ship to move at this speed and not be detected earlier? And how is it even traveling without any power source we can trace?" His second-in-command, Lieutenant Oren, spoke up. "Should we notify the High Command? This could be bigger than we think." Zane didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. There was a feeling in his gut, something he couldn't quite shake. Something told him this wasn't just a simple ship. It was a sign of something greater, something unknown, and the Empire wasn't ready for whatever that might be. "We need more information," Zane said finally. "Set up a team to investigate the area. We'll need to track this ship, figure out where it's coming from. I want eyes on this ship at all times. If it's a threat, we need to be prepared." Oren nodded and immediately began giving orders to the other officers in the room. As they worked, Zane stared at the screen, watching as the strange ship continued to travel through the stars, as if it was heading somewhere specific. But where? And why? The ship moved without stopping, as if it had a purpose, but no one could figure out what that purpose was. Minutes passed, then hours. The ship continued its journey through space, and the Empire's sensors continued to chase it, but it was like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Every attempt to get closer only seemed to push the ship further away. It was as if the ship was toying with them, staying just out of reach. And then something even stranger happened. The ship disappeared. One moment it was there, moving at impossible speeds, and the next it was gone. The sensors went completely silent. The signal vanished without a trace. Zane's heart raced. What just happened? He muttered under his breath. Where did it go? Oren's voice came through, urgent and tight. "Captain, we've lost the signal. It's like it never existed." The room went silent. Everyone stared at their screens, hoping for the signal to return. But it didn't. There was nothing, just an empty space where the ship had once been. For a moment, it felt like they were all in the dark, floating in an empty void, unsure of what to do next. But then Zane stood up straight, his eyes cold with determination. "This isn't over," he said firmly. "We will find it again. And when we do, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with." The mystery of the ship was only beginning, and the Empire had no idea how much it would change everything. But one thing was certain. Whatever it was not something they could ignore. The game had changed. The Empire's fleet was now on high alert, as strange things began to happen. Despite losing the signal, a strange sense of unease lingered in the air. Captain Zane knew that the mysterious ship wasn't just some anomaly. It was something far greater. He stared at the blank screen, trying to piece together any clue that could explain what they had just witnessed. His crew had worked tirelessly, but every method they tried to track it had failed. Days passed, and the Empire's officers scoured the area around the last known location of the ship. Still, there was nothing. The stars seemed to hold their secrets, refusing to offer any hints. Zane spent long hours in the command room, but even his seasoned mind couldn't fathom what was going on. The ship had simply vanished, as though it had never existed at all. Yet, the emptiness didn't last long. One quiet evening, while Captain Zane was reviewing old records, a strange pulse rippled through the communication system. It wasn't a signal or a message, but something more. Subtle, something in the air shifted, as though the ship was somehow calling out to them again. Zane jumped to his feet. "We've got something," he said. His voice was calm, but his heart raced. He knew what this was. The ship had returned. The crew scrambled to find the source of the pulse. It wasn't a traditional signal, but something was definitely there. They traced the energy back to a point in space that was completely unexplored, an uncharted sector. "Prepare the fleet for a deep exploration," Zane ordered, trying to keep his voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline he felt. "We need to find it before it slips away again." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Oren, quickly relayed the orders, and soon the fleet was on its way. As they approached the coordinates, a strange feeling settled over the ship. It was as if they were moving into an unknown realm. The stars around them didn't look the same. There was a strange dimness to the light. Space itself seemed to shift, like the laws of physics were bending. The deeper they traveled, the more disconnected they felt from the Empire's familiar technologies. The communications network started to flicker, and the standard readings on their equipment began to shift. It was almost as if their systems were being influenced by something far beyond their comprehension. "I don't like this," Oren said, glancing at the screens. "This doesn't feel right." "I agree," Zane replied, "but we can't turn back now." The crew felt a quiet tension. There was no turning back from this journey. They were chasing something that seemed impossible to track, yet they had no choice but to continue. What was the ship? Where did it come from? And why did it seem to have no origin at all? As they ventured deeper, a shimmering light began to appear ahead of them. It was faint at first, but slowly it grew brighter, like a distant star. Then, without warning, the light exploded into a burst of energy that enveloped the fleet's ships. But there was no danger. The energy didn't harm them. In fact, it felt like it was guiding them. And then they saw it. The ship. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Its shape wasn't sharp or angular like the ships of the Empire. Instead, it was smooth, almost organic. The surface of the ship shimmered, reflecting light in a way that felt otherworldly. It wasn't just a ship, it was something far beyond what the Empire had ever built. The ship didn't move like any other. It didn't have thrusters or engines like the Empire's fleet. Instead, it seemed to glide effortlessly through space, as though it didn't rely on traditional propulsion at all. The closer they got, the more they realized that this was no ordinary vessel. It was something that defied all logic. Captain Zane's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. This was the ship they had been chasing. The one that had moved faster than light. The one with no known origin. "Open a comm channel," Zane ordered. He needed to know who or what was controlling this ship, if anyone was controlling it at all. The crew worked quickly to establish a connection, but there was no response. It was as if the ship didn't need communication. It simply existed, moving through space as it pleased. Suddenly, the ship shifted. A pulse of energy radiated from it, and the entire fleet's ships shuddered. Zane gripped the armrest of his chair, feeling the strange power surging through the air. The ship didn't just move. It seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it. This can't be possible," Lieutenant Orin whispered, his eyes wide. "How is it doing this?" Zane didn't have an answer. Nothing about this made sense. The technology was far beyond the Empire's reach, and yet here it was, right in front of them. The ship seemed to be calling out, but to whom? And why? As they closed the distance, the ship began to shift again, slowly fading from sight. But this time, instead of disappearing entirely, it simply slowed down. It almost seemed to pause, waiting for them to catch up. "Is it waiting for us?" Orin asked, his voice trembling slightly. Zane nodded. He could feel it too. The ship wasn't running anymore. It wasn't trying to escape. It was offering them a chance. But what was the ship trying to say? And who would be brave enough to approach it? They had arrived at the center of the mystery. And now, the true question remained. What would the Empire do next? Captain Zane stood at the observation window, his gaze fixed on the ship. The shimmering vessel hovered in the vast emptiness of space, almost as if it were waiting for something, waiting for them. His mind raced with questions, too many to count, and none of them seemed to have answers. He had been part of the Empire's fleet for years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Captain," Lieutenant Orin said, his voice cutting through Zane's thoughts. "The fleet is ready for the next phase. But there's one thing we haven't considered. We don't know what's inside the ship. What if it's empty? Or worse, what if we're not meant to find it at all?" Zane turned to face Orin. He could see the hesitation in his eyes, the same uncertainty that lingered in the air. The Empire's fleet was ready to move forward, but the decision weighed heavily on everyone. The unknown had always been a part of space exploration, but this was different. The ship wasn't just unknown. It was a mystery that defied the very laws of science and technology. "I know," Zane said, his voice low. "But we can't ignore it. We need to find out who or what is behind this. And if it's empty, then we'll leave. But if there's something inside..." He didn't finish the thought. They all knew the stakes. The decision was made. A team of experts would board the ship. The crew was nervous, but they trusted Zane. He had always been their leader, the one who made the tough calls. He took a deep breath and turned to the others. "Prepare a shuttle," he ordered. "I'll go. I need to see it for myself." The team worked quickly. Zane suited up, making sure every piece of equipment was in place. He wasn't afraid, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at him. There was no telling what awaited them inside that ship. Was it alive? Was it a weapon? Or was it something far more ancient and mysterious? The possibilities seemed endless, but one thing was certain. They needed to know. As Zane boarded the shuttle, a strange feeling settled over him. It wasn't fear, but something else, something deeper. He looked out the window as the shuttle moved toward the ship. It was much larger up close, stretching out into the darkness like a shadow in the stars. The surface of the ship was smooth, almost like metal, but with an otherworldly sheen, reflecting the light from the shuttle. The shuttle slowly approached the docking bay of the ship, and Zane could feel the pull of something unknown. The energy around the ship seemed to draw him in, making his thoughts blur. He tried to shake off the sensation, focusing on the task at hand. The shuttle doors opened, and Zane stepped out, followed by his team. They were met with a silence that was both eerie and peaceful. The air was different here, cooler and heavier. The walls of the ship were smooth, almost organic in appearance, as if they had grown rather than been built. The team moved carefully, unsure of what to expect. "Stay close," Zane said, his voice low. The others nodded, their faces tense as they followed him down the dark corridor. The ship was silent, no hum of engines, no sounds of life. It felt as though time itself had stopped. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the ship, they found something that they hadn't expected. Symbols. The walls were covered in strange markings, intricate designs that seemed to glow faintly. They were unlike anything Zane had ever seen, far beyond the Empire's understanding of writing or communication. The symbols didn't seem to belong to any known civilization. They felt ancient, but there was something familiar about them, as if they had seen these patterns in old texts, hidden in the deepest corners of history. "I've never seen anything like this," Lieutenant Orin muttered as he touched one of the markings. It glowed faintly under his hand, as if reacting to his touch. The moment he moved his hand away, the glow faded, leaving only the dark lines on the wall. Zane paused, turning to look at Orin. "Be careful," he warned. "We don't know what these markings mean." But before they could move further, a low sound vibrated through the ship. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. It was like a hum, deep and resonant. The team stopped in their tracks, exchanging wary glances. "Did you hear that?" Orin asked. Zane nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm, though he knew he wouldn't need it. This was no battle. It was something else entirely. The hum grew louder, and the air around them seemed to pulse with energy. It was as if the ship itself was alive, reacting to their presence. Without warning, the walls of the ship shifted. The corridor ahead of them seemed to stretch, the walls moving and reshaping as if they were made of liquid. It was disorienting, like the very structure of the ship was changing right before their eyes. "This is impossible," Zane whispered, unable to tear his eyes away from the shifting walls. "We've never encountered anything like this." They moved forward cautiously, each step feeling like they were walking deeper into the unknown. The hum grew louder, until it filled the air around them, vibrating through their bones. And then, without warning, a doorway appeared in front of them. It wasn't there a moment ago, but now it stood before them, dark and foreboding. The door was framed by the same strange symbols that covered the walls. Zane took a deep breath, steeling himself. He motioned for the team to follow him. They moved toward the door, and as they crossed the threshold, the ship seemed to welcome them. It felt like they were entering a new realm, one that was as ancient as the stars themselves. Inside, the room was vast, unlike any space they had ever encountered. The floor was covered in a strange material that shimmered like starlight. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, one that resembled a control panel but was far more intricate and complex than anything the Empire had ever built. It glowed faintly, responding to their presence. "What is this place?" Orin asked, his voice filled with awe. Zane didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure. They had only just begun to uncover the mysteries of this ship, and the deeper they went, the more they would discover about the strange, impossible vessel that had appeared out of nowhere. Zane stood before the massive structure in the heart of the ship, his mind racing with questions. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, complex, ancient, and undeniably advanced. The room around him pulsed with energy, as if the ship itself was alive and aware of their presence. Every surface seemed to shimmer, its glow more intense with every step they took. Lieutenant Orin moved closer to one of the panels, his hand hovering over it, but he hesitated. The air was thick with anticipation. Whatever was about to happen, none of them knew. Zane could sense it too, the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. "What do you think it is?" Orin finally asked, his voice quiet but filled with wonder. Zane's gaze never left the strange panel before him. It seemed to react to his presence, shifting colors and patterns, as if it were studying him in return. "I don't know," he admitted, though he hated to say it. but I think we're about to find out." The silence in the room grew, stretching longer than it should have. Then the hum that had been a background noise in the ship grew louder, deeper, resonating through the floor and into their very bones. The air felt charged, heavy with something that was both unfamiliar and strangely familiar. It was as if this ship had been waiting for them, for this exact moment. Zane took a cautious step forward, his boots making a soft echo in the empty space. His team followed him, but their movements were slow, hesitant. The walls around them seemed to move, adjusting to the shifts in their positions. It was as if the ship was not just a passive vessel, but something far more active, adapting to the crew's presence. As Zane reached the center of the room, the massive structure before him began to glow brighter, the intricate patterns becoming more defined. It was like a network of interconnected lines, each one flowing into the next, creating a tapestry of light. Slowly, it became clear that these weren't just random markings. They were a form of communication, an unknown language, waiting to be unlocked. Orin stepped closer. "Should we try to activate it?" he asked, his voice tense with both excitement and caution. Zane thought for a moment, then nodded. "Let's see what happens, but be careful. We don't know what it will do." With careful hands, Orin pressed his fingers to one of the glowing lines. The moment his touch made contact, the ship seemed to react. The entire room shifted, and the hum grew to a crescendo. Zane instinctively took a step back, as the floor beneath them seemed to tremble. The walls expanded, revealing new passages, and strange sounds filled the air. Whispers, low and unintelligible, almost as if the ship was speaking to them. The ship was alive, not in the biological sense, but in a way that no machine they had ever encountered had been. It was aware, active, and seemingly willing to communicate. But how? Suddenly, the glowing structure split open, revealing a darkened passageway. It beckoned them forward, the air ahead filled with the same energy they had been feeling since boarding the ship. It felt almost like an invitation. But Zane couldn't shake the feeling that they were not merely visitors in this strange place. They were intruders, uninvited and unprepared. He turned to his team. "Stay close," he said, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. Let's see where this leads. The team moved carefully, their footsteps echoing in the quiet as they passed through the newly opened doorway. The corridor was narrower than the main chamber, and the walls felt even more alive, pulsing with the same strange energy. As they walked, Zane felt an odd sensation, as if the ship was observing them, studying them as closely as they were studying it. As they ventured deeper into the ship, the corridor twisted, bending in ways that defied natural geometry. Zane's mind raced to keep up. The walls weren't just physical. They were somehow connected to the ship's mind. Every step seemed to change the path before them, reshaping the ship itself. It was like being inside a living organism, one that was aware of their movements and thoughts. They reached another chamber, this one even larger than the last. The space was filled with a soft, diffused light, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. At the center of the room was a massive crystalline structure. It wasn't a typical piece of technology. It looked more like a monument, ancient and eternal. The air around it hummed with a frequency Zane could feel in his chest. It was as though this was the heart of the ship, its core, the source of its power. Zane stepped forward, drawn to the crystal. As he got closer, the hum became more intense, almost overwhelming. He reached out, his hand hovering over the surface, but before he could touch it, a voice, clear and calm, spoke in his mind. "Welcome." The voice wasn't loud, but it filled the room, resonating with a deep, ancient power. Zane froze, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The voice wasn't human, yet it sounded understanding, as if it knew exactly who he was and why he had come. The others around him stopped, exchanging wary glances. They had all heard it, even though the voice had not come through any visible speaker. Who? Who are you? Zane thought, not speaking aloud but projecting his thoughts into the void. There was a long pause before the voice answered. We are the keepers, the ones who have watched over the stars. The words were simple, yet they held so much weight. Zane's mind raced. The keepers. What did that mean? Were they beings of some kind, or were they the remnants of a civilization long gone? The question flooded his thoughts. You seek answers, but all answers come with a price, the voice continued, its tone unchanging. Are you ready to pay it? Zane swallowed hard. His mind reeled. They had come to understand the ship, to uncover its secrets. But at what cost? What was the price for the knowledge they sought? He turned to his crew. Their faces were filled with uncertainty, fear, but also curiosity. They were all ready, but none of them could fully comprehend what they were about to face. We have no choice, Zane whispered, his voice steady. We've come this far. We must continue. As the words left his mouth, the crystal in front of him began to pulse with light. The room seemed to vibrate as if the very fabric of reality itself was shifting. Whatever this was, whatever lay ahead, Zane knew that they were about to enter the heart of the unknown. And there would be no going back. The crystal before Zane pulsed with an energy that seemed to resonate with every beat of his heart. It was as if it were alive, its very presence humming in the air. His team stood silently behind him, each of them caught in the same web of fascination and uncertainty. The voice of the keepers had faded, but its message lingered in the silence. All answers come with a price. Are you ready to pay it? The words echoed in Zane's mind, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of them pressing down on him. Zane reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it hovered just above the crystal's surface. He felt an invisible force drawing him in, as though the ship itself was beckoning him closer, urging him to understand. He could feel the energy crackling in the air, thick and charged, like static before a storm. There was no going back now. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. The team behind him shifted, uneasy, but none of them spoke. They were all waiting for him to make the first move. Slowly, almost reverently, Zane's fingers brushed against the crystal. The moment they made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, as though the very fabric of space and time had bent around his touch. The room seemed to warp and shimmer. Zane's vision blurred, and the air around him thickened. He felt as though he were falling through layers of reality, like he was drifting through a dream. Yet every sensation felt so real. The voices of his crew faded into a distant hum, and for a brief moment, Zane wondered if he had made a grave mistake. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the sensation stopped. Zane blinked and found himself standing in a vast, endless space. The ground beneath him was soft, like sand, yet it seemed to stretch out infinitely in all directions. There were no stars here, no walls or ships, just a vast, empty expanse. He turned around, but his crew was gone. He was alone. Where am I? He whispered, his voice barely a sound in the vastness. He was still on the ship, yet this place felt so far removed from everything he knew. A soft whisper in the air, like a breath carried on the wind, filled the silence. You have entered the realm of the keepers. The voice again. It was as clear and calm as before, but now it surrounded him, echoing through the void. What is this place? Zane asked, his voice steady despite the rising unease in his chest. This is where knowledge is born, the voice replied. This is where we watch over the threads of time and space. This is where we store the knowledge of all civilizations that have risen and fallen, where all mysteries are preserved. Zane looked around, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, or rather, what he wasn't seeing. There were no tangible objects here, no stars or planets. Yet he felt something in the air, an undeniable presence. It was as though he was standing in the very heart of the universe itself, a place where everything, past, present, and future, was one. He took a tentative step forward, the soft sand shifting beneath his boots. And why have you brought me here? he asked. "Why now?" The voice was silent for a moment, as though contemplating his question. "You seek answers. You wish to understand the ship, the beings who built it, and the mysteries that it holds. But the knowledge you seek is not without consequence. Every discovery has its price." Zane frowned. "What do you mean? What price?" "To know the truth is to carry the burden of it," the voice said. "Once you understand the secrets of the universe, you cannot forget them. The knowledge will stay with you, forever changing you. Are you prepared for that?" Zane felt a shiver run down his spine. This was far more than he had bargained for. He had thought they were simply exploring a mysterious ship, uncovering its secrets. But this, it felt like something much larger. It felt as though the very fabric of reality was being offered to him, as if he could reach out and touch the universe itself. But there was a cost he hadn't considered. I don't know," Zane muttered, uncertainty creeping into his voice. He had always been one to make decisions quickly, to lead his crew with confidence. But now, with the weight of the universe pressing down on him, he couldn't help but hesitate. "What happens if we don't accept the knowledge?" The voice was quiet for a moment. "Then you will leave. The ship will return to its slumber, and the mysteries you seek will remain just that, mysteries. But if you choose to leave, you will never understand. You will never know what lies beyond the stars." Zane's heart raced. The decision was more complicated than he had imagined. He could choose to turn back, to forget everything that had brought him here. The ship would remain a mystery, and he and his crew would continue their lives, unaware of what they had missed. But could he really walk away from this? Could he live the rest of his life, knowing that the answers to everything, the mysteries of the universe, the reason the ship existed, were within his grasp? His thoughts swirled as he weighed the decision. He thought of his crew, of the Empire, of the countless people who depended on him. This was more than just about him. It was about all of humanity. What if the knowledge they uncovered could change everything? What if it held the key to peace, or to understanding the universe in ways that no one had ever imagined? Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "I'm ready. I want to know." The air around him seemed to shimmer with approval. "Then step forward," the voice said, and the ground beneath his feet began to shift. "The path to knowledge is before you. But remember, it is not just knowledge you will gain. You will gain understanding. And with it, the responsibility to protect what you learn." Zane's heart beat faster as the ground beneath him began to rise, forming a path before him, leading deeper into the unknown. As he stepped forward, the air grew colder and a feeling of awe washed over him. He was on the brink of something vast, something beyond his understanding. And yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was where he was always meant to be. The journey ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Zane had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back now. Zane's steps echoed through the growing darkness, each footfall seeming to carry him deeper into the heart of the ship. The path before him was narrow and winding, the walls surrounding him shifting and pulsing with an almost sentient energy. He could feel it now. This ship was alive, not in a biological sense, but in a way that made him feel small and insignificant in comparison. He had crossed into the realm of the unknown, a place where every step felt like a delicate dance with fate. The ground beneath his feet was soft, almost like walking through a fine mist that clung to his boots. The air was thick with a palpable energy, and the deeper he moved into the ship, the more intense it became. There was a hum in the distance, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. It was a sound unlike anything Zane had ever heard, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through his very bones. As he walked, his mind raced with the implications of what was happening. The keepers, the beings who had spoken to him through the crystal, had made it clear that the knowledge they held came with a cost. But what did that really mean? What price would he have to pay for the truth? Was he truly prepared for what lay ahead? The path ahead suddenly widened, and Zane found himself in a vast chamber that seemed to stretch on forever. The ceiling was impossibly high, vanishing into darkness. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, an intricate network of glowing lines and symbols that seemed to pulse with life. It was unlike anything he had seen before, a blend of organic and mechanical, a perfect fusion of technology and nature. The energy in the room was overwhelming, and Zane couldn't help but feel drawn to it, as though it were calling to him. He approached the structure slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with tension, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. As he drew closer, the symbols on the structure began to shift, rearranging themselves into patterns that were both familiar and completely foreign. It was as if the ship was trying to communicate with him, to show him something. But what? Without thinking, Zane reached out and touched one of the glowing symbols. The moment his fingers made contact, the room around him seemed to shudder. The energy surged, and the ground beneath him trembled. He stumbled back, his heart racing, as a sudden rush of images flooded his mind. They were not his own. These were memories of another time, another place. Strange, alien faces flashed before his eyes, their expressions filled with wisdom and sorrow. He saw vast cities, their towering spires stretching into the sky, and great machines that hummed with power. And then, a single image, a ship, unlike any Zane had ever seen, soaring through the stars at an unimaginable speed. The images were gone as quickly as they had come, leaving Zane breathless and disoriented. He staggered back, trying to make sense of what he had just experienced. The chamber was silent again, the energy still pulsing around him. But now, it felt different. It was no longer just a passive force. It was waiting, watching. Zane's mind raced as he tried to process the images. What had he just seen? Was it a vision of the past, or was it a glimpse of the future? And what was the ship that had appeared before him? He knew it wasn't just any ship. It was the same ship they had been chasing, the one that had no origin, moving faster than light. But how was that possible? How could a ship exist outside of time and space? As he stood there, lost in thought, a soft voice filled the air, as if coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. You have seen what was and what may be. The ship you seek is not of your time. It exists beyond the bounds of your understanding, and it holds the key to everything. Zane looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but there was no one there. The voice wasn't coming from a physical being. It was as if it was part of the ship itself, an extension of the energy that filled the space. What do you mean? Zane asked aloud, his voice shaky. How can it hold the key? The key to what? The voice responded, calm and knowing. The key to your future. The future of all who exist. The ship you seek is the bridge between worlds, a vessel that can traverse not only space but time itself. It holds the power to shape the destiny of your people, and yet it is bound by rules you cannot yet comprehend. Zane felt a chill run through him. This was more than just a mystery. It was a turning point. Whatever he discovered here, whatever truth lay hidden in this ship, it would change everything. He had known that from the moment he first stepped onto the ship, but now the reality of it was beginning to settle in. But to wield such power is not without consequence, the voice continued. You must decide what to do with the knowledge you uncover. Will you use it to save your people, or will you let it slip through your fingers, as countless civilizations have done before you? The weight of the question hung heavy in the air. Zane swallowed, the words reverberating in his mind. He had come this far, seeking answers, but now the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. If he truly understood the secrets of the ship, the technology it contained, and the power it offered, there would be no going back. It would be up to him to decide how to use that power, and whether humanity was ready for it. He turned away from the structure, his heart heavy with the enormity of the decision before him. He had always prided himself on his ability to make tough choices, to lead his crew with confidence. But this This was something far beyond anything he had ever faced. The future of humanity, of the entire galaxy, now rested on his shoulders. But Zane couldn't afford to dwell on the uncertainty. He had to move forward, to learn more, to unlock the secrets of the ship and understand the power it held. He had come too far to turn back. And with that resolve, he stepped deeper into the chamber, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Zane stood at the center of the vast chamber, feeling the weight of the decisions that had brought him here. The air around him hummed with energy, the walls of the ship alive with a pulse that seemed to echo his thoughts. Every step he had taken had led him to this moment, and the questions still lingered in the back of his mind. He had seen the visions, felt the call of the ship, and yet the full extent of what lay before him was still beyond his comprehension. He could feel the presence of the ship more than just a machine. It was a consciousness, a force that had witnessed countless generations rise and fall. This was no mere vessel. It was a living entity, with knowledge and power beyond anything he had ever imagined. And now, standing on the edge of this discovery, Zane realized that the future of humanity lay in his hands. The soft, steady hum of the ship grew louder, as if responding to his inner turmoil. Zane felt a strange pull within him, a connection between himself and the ship that defied explanation. He closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself, trying to block out the overwhelming thoughts swirling in his mind. This was no longer just about uncovering the secrets of an ancient civilization. This was about choosing a path forward, one that could change the course of history. "You have seen the ship," the voice of the keepers echoed in his mind. "Now, the decision is yours. What will you do with the knowledge you have gained?" Zane opened his eyes, focusing on the structure in front of him. The glowing symbols still shifted and pulsed, their patterns constantly changing as if they were alive. He could almost hear them calling to him, urging him to take the final step, to unlock the full potential of what the ship offered. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. The power contained within this ship was immense, capable of reshaping the universe itself. He had seen the future, the endless possibilities that could unfold if humanity gained control of such power. But with it came great responsibility. He had learned that the ship was not merely a tool. It was a bridge, a link between worlds and times. It had been built to travel not just across the stars, but through the very fabric of existence. Zane thought of his crew, the men and women who had followed him into this unknown, all of them eager for answers. He thought of the Empire, of the countless lives that depended on the choices he made. Could humanity truly handle the knowledge contained in the ship? Could they wield such power without losing themselves in the process? The voice spoke again, softer this time, almost as though it were speaking directly to his soul. "You are the keeper of this knowledge now, Zane. The path ahead is unclear, but you must choose your direction. The ship can offer great things, but it will not wait forever. Time is not on your side." Zane's heart raced. He had always been a man of action, someone who led with confidence and conviction. But this was different. This was not just about his future. It was about the future of all life in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him, and for the first time, he felt the full magnitude of what he had uncovered. He glanced around the chamber, taking in the immensity of the ship, the vast network of glowing lines and symbols that surrounded him. It was ancient, yet alive with power, a fusion of technology, and something far more mysterious. The ship was a relic of a time long past, but it still held the key to the future. Zane closed his eyes again, feeling the presence of the ship reach out to him. The connection between them was undeniable, like a thread weaving its way through the very fabric of his being. He could feel the knowledge, the possibilities, all within his grasp. But the question remained, what would he do with it? He thought of his crew once more. They had come with him, trusting him to lead them through the unknown. They believed in him, just as he had always believed in them. Zane knew he couldn't make this decision alone. He couldn't shoulder the burden of this knowledge without sharing it with those who had stood by him. The voice of the keepers spoke once more, their tone now almost sympathetic. "You cannot turn back now, Zane. The ship is part of you, and you are part of it. What you choose will shape the future of your people and of countless others who will never know your name." The path before him was uncertain, but Zane knew one thing for sure. He could not face this alone. He turned away from the structure, moving toward the door of the chamber. The energy in the air seemed to pulse as he walked, but now it no longer felt like a weight pressing down on him. It felt like a presence guiding him forward. As he emerged from the chamber, his crew was waiting, standing in a line at the far end of the corridor. They looked at him expectantly, their faces a mixture of concern and hope. Zane took a moment to collect his thoughts, gathering the words he needed to share. "We've come this far," he began, his voice steady. "We've uncovered more than we could ever have imagined. But now we face a choice. The ship holds the key to our future, but it's not something we can take lightly. It's not just about us. It's about everyone. The knowledge it offers could change everything, but it could also destroy us if we aren't careful." He paused, looking each member of his crew in the eye. "I don't have all the answers, but I know that whatever we decide, we'll do it together. We've come this far because we trusted each other, and I believe we can handle whatever comes next, if we stay united." There was a long silence before one of the crew members, a woman named Ilara, stepped forward. Her face was filled with determination. "We trust you, Zane. We're with you, no matter what." Zane nodded, grateful for her words. He turned to the rest of the crew, and one by one, they echoed her sentiment. He felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they would face the unknown. Together, they would make the choice that would define their future. And whatever happened next, they would do it as one.